There is a man, as we speak, who I would safely bet is facing hard questions. I believe he's detained in Cove Garda Station. You're currently in Youghal in County Cork for the case of Tina Satchwell.
Yeah, I mean, this is huge. This is probably the most significant development in this case. We've talked about it previously on the podcast, but just to remind people that on the 20th of March 2017, that's when Tina Satchwell went missing. She was last seen at her home here in Youghal, which I am sitting meters away from at the moment. I'm sitting here in Mick O'Neill, photographer's car, and we're very much live at the scene. So it's good. It's exciting in one way to be live at the scene, and to be, even as I'm talking to you here, I'm keeping an eye here just to see if anything's going on, because it's been quite lively this morning. A comprehensive search is now taking place inside and around the back of the property here, which is the home of Tina Satchwell, the home that she shared with her husband, Richard Satchwell. And it's on Grattan Street in Youghal, just to give you a picture of where it is. So it's kind of a small, sort of a it's a main street, but it's a relatively small street, and the house is right opposite the local credit union. So there's been a kind of a crowd coming and going. Last night there was a huge crowd outside when news broke, basically, that this house had been sealed off by Garda, and that a man in his 50s had been arrested. So we had, it's safe to say, some intelligence, certainly you did, that perhaps something might be going down.
You hear whispers.
You hear whispers, but we weren't 100% certain of everything. But we were preparing ourselves for the big story, so to speak. And then yesterday evening, the news broke that this man in his 50s had been arrested. As you say, he's now currently being questioned in Cove Garda Station. He is arrested on suspicion of the murder of Tina Satchwell. And the difference is, the significance of this is that up until now, this has been what's called a missing persons case. It wasn't a murder case. She was considered a missing person, and that's very different. Once they open a murder case, they're opening an incident room, and a huge number of resources are put into this case that there weren't before. So clearly the guards have intel, some kind of information that has led to the upgrading of this case in the last 24 hours and the arrest of this man.
Yes, and it's becoming an increasing trend. We can think, for example, of the case of Deirdre Jacob, who went missing in 1998. Same thing, she's a missing person, but her body has never been recovered. Now, the reason I'm saying body is because Garda a while ago upgraded that to a murder case, and we know that they prepared a file for the Director of Public Prosecutions in relation to Larry Murphy. Now, the DPP ruled no charges in that, but that is a murder case. So that, and there, if you think of, the couple who went missing in Stamullen, I think around 2018, that's a murder case that there's never been any remains found in that. So, and Jojo Dullard as well, who's another missing person, that's a murder inquiry as well. So that we have seen in the last few years, but maybe we should talk about this. Obviously, there is a threshold before which you can say it's a murder case.
Yes.
So they've obviously, and we're probably limited as to what we can say, but there has been a person of interest for quite some time. But it's a question of, right, they have to persuade their superiors, and they have to ultimately persuade the DPP. This is not a missing person, this is a murder. And so it is obviously intelligence, but they have to have evidence to show, right, this is why we believe there is a murder case here. And it's not a decision they take lightly.
Yes, and we're not privy to all of that information. We do have in our story in the Mirror and the Star today, that there is a belief that renovation work took place in this house at some point, and that is of significance to this investigation, that renovations were done in this house. The guards have brought in various mini digger machines are being brought into the back of the property, so we know that they are digging. And obviously, look, the suspicion is that the body of Tina Satchwell is buried on the property. In other words, she never left home, and that's significant because the claims up until now is that she was last seen at her home, and no one saw her ever since. There was extensive CCTV canvassing of witnesses, and never any concrete evidence that she was seen anywhere in Youghal, outside of Youghal, whatever. And just to give people a background to the circumstances, which are quite unusual, according to Tina's husband Richard, he said that he was leaving the house on the 20th, and she had asked him whether he was going to go out to Dungarvan, and he said goodbye to her, and he says that that's the last time that he saw her. When he came back to the house, she was gone, and the 2 dogs that they owned were still in the house, and he thought that that was unusual, he said, because she never went anywhere without her dogs. Subsequent to that, a number of unusual things happened. There was a discovery of suitcases by Mr. Satchwell. We never really learned whether they were of any significance at all to the investigation. And then there was a claim of a 5-figure sum of money that had been taken allegedly by Miss Satchwell when she disappeared. Her husband, many people will remember, has been interviewed multiple times on TV and on radio, and has spoken about the mysterious circumstances in which she disappeared. Said there wasn't any problems, and really in their relationship they were having some difficulties, he said, but nothing in terms of anything serious. He also was directly questioned about potentially being a suspect himself, and he said at one point in an interview that he felt that maybe at some point he was a suspect, but he no longer feels that that's the case. He also mentioned in a previous interview that his house was searched, and he said that the guards have the keys to his house and that they can search his house at any time. This was a claim that he made. He's been extensively interviewed over the years, but I would say maybe in the last 2-3 years hasn't done as many interviews as he did in those initial first couple of years. And then people might remember the other significant development then was in 2018. There was a search of a wooded area there in Castlemartyr, near the 5-star hotel there, and there was a claim at the time that a man had gone into the forest with what appeared to be Tina Satchwell and came out alone, and that prompted, I think it was a week-long search of that wooded area, a huge search at the time. And Richard was even photographed going down and looking at the scene, and he was interviewed at the time. But that search came up with nothing, sadly. And up until yesterday, there has been virtually no update in this case whatsoever.
Okay, so let's talk procedural, a couple of things. He's in Cove Garda Station. He's been held under Section 4 of the Criminal Justice Act. Now, that gives Gardaí, it's what they call 6 and 6 and 12. So an initial 6 hours detention. After that, the local superintendent has to extend for another 6 hours. And then after that, the local chief superintendent, so the divisional officer, extends for another 12 hours. Now,
Yes.
from at midnight, so I think this person was arrested at
About 5 o'clock, yeah.
So from 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock, it's probably maybe say 6:30, 7 o'clock to midnight, because there's all preparation and everything. So so at midnight they have to offer the person the chance to suspend or keep going through the night. I'll give an example. When Graham Dwyer was arrested, he decided to go through the night. One of the few people I've known who goes through the night. So, but usually it's suspended from 12 o'clock until 8 o'clock, midnight until 8 a.m. We don't know what has happened in this case, do we?
No, I mean, what I'm hearing is that he's currently being questioned. So we're not in a break period at the moment. And, as you mentioned, it's a 24-hour period. There are breaks. That would mean if there are no breaks, we should expect to hear, and I was certainly guided that I might hear something towards 5 or 6 p.m. this evening. But as to what, it may well be an extension of his detention, which can be authorized by a superintendent. We've yet to see what that development, if anything, might be, but it could well go into the late hours of this evening before we hear any update in relation to that. I just want to mention as well, just in the last hour or two, there has been a lot of activity here at the house. We've seen the dog unit, and a dog has been brought into the property. That's of interest, obviously. I mean, dogs can be trained as cadaver dogs to search for a body. So it is significant to see a dog being brought inside. Also, I'm just going to say for the moment, I understand a number of items have been taken from the house, and we've seen them being sealed into bags. So they have already been searching the house and seizing certain items from the house.
And let me ask you, Paul, and just to explain cadaver dogs, they can They can be, dogs have a fantastic sense of smell, obviously, and the cadaver dogs are specifically trained to smell or to detect the stench of death. But that also includes blood. I mean, there have been cases where guard dogs have detected blood in various other cases. So they can detect death, but also blood and things like that. Can I just ask you, Paul, is the activity both inside the house and on the sort of the land around the house, shall we say?
At the moment, it seems to me, and I can't see inside the house. There could be, but there's a huge amount of activity certainly going on at the side of and at the back outside, and that's they predominantly seem to be cutting down trees and moving shrubs and shrubbery and stuff out of the way. But as I said, certain items seem to have been seized that must have come from the inside of the house. I'll put it that way. Certainly last night, a lot of activity inside the house. All the lights were on, and the Garda Technical Bureau were inside the house last night. Huge crowd gathered outside. You can really tell, like, I mean, everyone in this town is connected to the case in some sense. And I spoke to people, you know, I mean, they all want it to be solved. They're all frustrated that it's taken 6 years to get any kind of answers in this case. The only sad thing, I suppose, is like a lot of people don't seem to really know Tina Satchwell personally. Or Richard Satchwell. They seem to have kind of kept it themselves. They were a quiet couple. They used to kind of go to used car sales and shows kind of outside of the Youghal area. So, Youghal was kind of their base, but they don't seem to be particularly well known yet, judging by the size of the crowd last night. I mean, obviously people are just interested and curious, but there was a huge sense of people want to see justice in this case, want to see answers as well.
And we know that the Garda Technical Bureau is down, and the Garda Dog Unit is down. So it's always a local investigation. So it's Middleton Garda District, I believe, is leading the investigation, but they have access to assets, national assets, which are very important, like the Dog Unit and the Technical Bureau, and they have things like ground radar and all that sort of stuff, and obviously very precise digging equipment. So it is a major Garda investigation and operation.
Yeah, I just going back to there must be some major development that we don't know about that has steered this case back to where it started. And in many cases, that's the way it goes, isn't it? You go back to where it all started. It all started here at this house. It's the last place that she was seen. Extensive hours of CCTV have been studied. Witnesses across the country and in the UK have been interviewed. Interpol have got involved in this case. 400 lines of inquiry, over 400 lines of inquiry, hundreds of hours of CCTV. So they did examine whether she left the country. Certainly Richard Satchwell was of the opinion that she was alive and had left the country. And, she has family in the UK, but her family in the UK have always insisted she's never made any contact with us. And if she was alive and well, sadly, she certainly would have made contact with her sister who lives over there in the UK. But she hasn't in all this time. So the investigation was focused on externally, and now it has all come back to the house. So that's really, really interesting. And we're certainly of the belief that they have certainly a significant development has happened that's led to the arrest of this man in the search of the house.
And it is important to stress that guards are up against it here time-wise. They're really a race against time because, the suspect will either be, they only have a certain amount, as I said, this 24 hours, but that can stretch into tomorrow depending on breaks and that sort of stuff.
They're under quite a bit of pressure. I think, as I said, they must have some evidence, some new piece of information. We have a clue in relation to the renovations, but there's more information that we're not privy to. I don't know whether they're putting that to the suspect, but the key thing really is what do they find in that house, and their hope is that they I mean, and I know that sounds morbid to say this, but they, obviously they've been upgraded it to a murder investigation, so they now believe that Tina Satchwell is dead. Their hope is that they do find her remains there at the house. The suspicion is that her body is there. I mean, if they find that may be enough evidence that they need in terms of their questioning of this suspect. So yeah, as you say, they're in a huge race against time.
All right, so This has been very dramatic. It's our first outside broadcast for the service.
Yeah, some slight technical difficulties, but we got it across the line. So yeah, look, I'm obviously still at the scene. I expect to be at the scene throughout today. If there are further updates, have a look on the live blog on irishmirror.ie. But hopefully we'll be back to you with another podcast, A Week in Crime, tomorrow.